Oral questions by members.
Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. More than a year ago, when I asked the Premier about SOJI and the sexualization of children in our schools, the Premier said raising this issue was, and I quote, cultural war and feeds the fires of division. Yesterday, we learned from the Minister of Education that this government is reviewing SOJI to make it more age-appropriate. Will the Premier now admit that he was wrong to characterize concerned parents as being hateful?
Premier.
We have a huge interest in making sure that all kids feel safe at school, regardless of who they are, where their origin is, and I regret very much the member of the opposition, members of his caucus, have repeatedly distorted a program that, by the way, the Leader of the Opposition stood behind, endorsed, supported as a member of the cabinet for many years, that caused fear among parents, particularly among parents from new arrival communities just arriving in BC, trying to figure out the school system, and then they hear about this horrific program. It's actually an anti-bullying program, Honourable Speaker, to protect kids. He and his colleagues promoted that hate and fear in our communities, and now, unsurprisingly, we have to go through and do some work with communities to make sure that they understand that we're out there to protect kids and look after them. And it didn't stop during the election campaign. Just last night, the opposition health critic was at a far-right event called We Unify. She was on a 3-person panel, one of whom was discredited Alberta doctor, Dr. William Mackes. She's the health critic. He said COVID-19 vaccines are neither safe nor effective. On Monday, he posted an article claiming the vaccine causes AIDS. Honourable Speaker, that was Monday. And related to SOJI.
Member.
Well, what did you say on the panel,
Members.
And after his medical license was cancelled, he said.
Premier.
After his medical license was cancelled, he said the Alberta College of Physicians and Surgeons should be renamed, quote, the College of Pedophiles and Child Sex Abusers. This is who the health critic for the opposition sat beside at a panel yesterday. That's the kind of hate they promote.
Leader of the Official Opposition, supplemental.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, it's pretty clear the Premier will not apologize to parents that he called hateful. But regardless of that, Mr. Speaker, I do have perhaps a different angle to take on this. So yesterday, the Minister of Education said, and I quote, the Minister is working towards a provincial framework that includes specific criteria ensuring age-appropriate materials are in school. End quote. Mr. Speaker, will the Minister commit today to having parents decide what is age-appropriate material in our schools?
Mr. Premier.
The Leader of the Opposition and his colleagues are repeatedly promoting disinformation, misleading parents, misleading British Columbians about everything from SOJI to what's happening in our schools. I encourage any parent, if you have concerns about what's happening in a school, talk to your teacher. Talk to your kid's teacher. Don't listen to the Leader of the Opposition or his health critic about what's happening in the province. She sits...
Members.
She sits beside a doctor who lied and said that 80 young doctors died from the COVID-19 vaccine. She sat beside a doctor that said COVID-19 vaccines are neither safe nor effective. She sat beside a doctor who said that COVID-19 vaccines cause AIDS. These are the people the opposition endorses, sits beside, give legitimacy to. What an embarrassment, Honourable Speaker.
Members. Come to order. Premier has the floor. Please.
I'm sure the member will stand up and clarify that she disagreed vehemently with his tweets, with his misrepresentation of vaccines. But will the Leader of the Opposition stand up and denounce her attendance at this conference?
Members, shh. Members, calm down. Members, you want to ask a question or anybody else? If not, wait for your turn. We'll take care of it. Please conclude.
Now, the member for Kamloops denounced the conference that the health critic was at, calling it, quote, a far-right conference. He said, quote, the Leader of the Opposition must clearly denounce this conference once and for all and explain to British Columbians why he and his candidates endorsed it in the first place. I wonder whether the Leader of the Opposition will denounce this conference and everything that happened at it last night.
Thank you.
And
Thank you. Members. Members. Please conclude.
thank you. I hope the Leader of the Opposition denounced the conference and his members' attendance at it.
Member for Chilliwack North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A BC housing project planned for Trethewey and Rowett Avenue is 4 years behind schedule. These 49 units for supportive and complex care are desperately needed for my constituents, both in and around Chilliwack. The closest recovery beds are in Surrey, a 2-hour round trip, if one is lucky enough to access one of the only 16 beds. With 0 new recovery beds in BC, in the BC NDP budget, when will this government commit to delivering additional treatment beds?
Minister of Housing.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. It's refreshing to hear somebody in this place on the opposite side talking about supportive housing and wanting it in their community. Honourable Speaker. You can call this a heritage moment, Honourable Speaker. You can call this a heritage moment. Honourable Speaker, we've been working closely with many community organizations on the ground to support people in Chilliwack in particular. We have a project that's in front of Council right now that will help get a lot of people off the streets, and I certainly hope that Mayor and Council approve it. I believe it's coming to Council tonight. I know we've heard from the Mayor there who says they don't want any supportive housing anymore, but there's people in the community that are struggling that need to get supports to get indoors. We offered the city additional supports this year in January, but they declined those supports. But we're going to continue to reach out because in the end of the day, Honourable Speaker, it's the people in the communities that need the service who we are focused on.
Member for Chilliwack North, supplemental.
Thank you for the comments from the Minister. I'm sure that the Mayor who I spoke with yesterday is not in agreement with the statement. The overdose crisis in BC continues to take lives every day. Residents in Hope have no local access to treatment unless they drive 2 hours in a 4-hour round trip in the most trying times of their lives. The window for opportunity is vanishing for vulnerable people. Again, when will this government get serious about funding abstinence-based treatment?
Minister of Housing.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. And again, I think if the member wants to see more supportive housing for vulnerable people in our community, I would welcome a letter.
Shh. Members, let the minister answer, please.
The Leader of the Opposition says, oh, we don't want supportive housing in the community.
Member, nobody has to clarify anything. I think the minister has heard the question. Let him answer.
I've heard the question. I understand the question. Honourable Speaker, if the member wants to find ways to support vulnerable, I heard the member say we have to support vulnerable people in the community. When you have people that are sleeping in encampments, sleeping in parks, you need them to get into housing. Yes, you need them to get access to treatment. You need to get access to supports. That's what we do with supportive housing. I think the members across the way surely understand that's what supportive housing does, Honourable Speaker. And so if the member wants to advocate for more support for vulnerable people in Hope in particular, I look forward to talking to the member because we want to help those people as well.
House Leader of the Third Party.
Honourable Speaker, as we face down a trade war with the United States, energy security has never been more important. We cannot and must not continue relying on American energy sources. We cannot and must not continue relying on the expansion of climate-killing LNG projects built by foreign companies and subsidized by BC taxpayers. Renewable wind, solar and geothermal projects are the solution. Recently, BC Hydro, of Site C Dam financial mismanagement infamy, announced with great fanfare that it secured 9 new wind projects at a cost of $5 to $6 billion. Oh my God, this is great. That was the Green Caucus response. There's just one hitch. These projects are 47% to 79% more costly than other comparable wind projects in North America. My question through you to the Premier, what will your government do to rein in BC Hydro and stop overpaying for the clean power we need for BC's energy security?
Minister of Energy and Climate Solutions.
Well, thank you, Honourable Speaker. And Honourable Speaker, I'm surprised at the question from the Honourable Member because I would have thought, do think, that it's extraordinary, Honourable Speaker, that we approve projects the size in terms of energy of Site C at 45% less than the last call for power in 2009, that are 51% on average owned by First Nations, Honourable Speaker, that have an average levelized cost of $74 per megawatt hour, $6 less than an equivalent call for power in Quebec recently, that this wouldn't be anything else than a success. We need more energy in BC, and we need more renewable energy, and we are just getting started.
Member has supplemental.
Mr. Speaker, BC has legislated targets to reduce emissions by 40% by 2030. About 10% of the planned emissions reduction was to be from increasing the price on carbon pollution. Yet this week, the Premier announced he would scrap the consumer carbon tax. The industrial carbon tax remains, but 2/3 of company emissions are exempted from the tax. There's no way BC is going to meet the 2030 target. The province's most recent climate accountability report says only very minor progress has been made, and that's before LNG Canada comes online. My question is to the Minister of Energy. Will the Minister introduce a regulatory emissions cap for the oil and gas industry this year, as previously promised?
Minister.
Well, thank you, Honourable Speaker. And as the member will know, and the most recent change to the regulations with respect to methane emissions from the oil and gas sector came in January 1st, that we've reduced methane emissions, for example, by 43% from 2015 levels, which is a significant achievement, not just by the people of BC, by the Clean BC plan, but by the industry itself, Honourable Speaker. That we have to continue again and again, Honourable Speaker, in a province where we've seen an increase in population. In my time on the government side of being close to 1 million people, we've got to continue to take action. It's why reducing our per capita emissions, as we have done significantly, reducing our emissions against GDP, as we have done significantly, continuing to pursue climate programs that are good for the economy, good for the people of the province, and good for their health is our goal. And it's why we're going to work with all members of the legislature, but in particular, members of the Green Party, on a joint review of the Clean BC program, which was scheduled for next year, and is going to happen this year.
Member for Caribou-Chilcotin.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Imagine 23 vehicles showing up in your yard filled with BC conservation officers wearing tactical equipment, some armed with assault rifles. Mr. Speaker, that is exactly what happened to a constituent in the Caribou last week. He had his windows smashed, doors kicked open, a total of $100,000 of damage done to his home and his property. They seized a cell phone and some paperwork. Mr. Speaker, they embarrassed him and his family. The cause? Incorrectly filled out paperwork. Mr. Speaker, what possible justification does the Minister of Environment have for using paramilitary-style force on any citizen who didn't dot an I on their paperwork? And did this minister order this raid?
Minister of Public Safety.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you to the member opposite for the question. I don't have knowledge of the incident of which you speak, but I will take it under advisement and get back to you.
Member supplemental.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It's not surprising that the Public Safety Minister doesn't know, because this doesn't fall to his ministry. The reality is this gets so much worse. Mr. Speaker, during this raid, conservation officers forced a woman who required a lavatory to urinate under surveillance of an officer, and then denied her the privacy to shower so that she could clean up and head off to work. They detained people without cause. They destroyed property and embarrassed my constituent and his family in a community where they are very well known. This isn't law enforcement, Mr. Speaker. It is harassment and intimidation. Does this minister support the flagrant abuse of power, and is this what ranchers, guide outfitters, and residents should expect from this new government?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you again to the member for the question. I'll take your question under advisement and get back to you.
Member for Delta South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, on December 9th, 2024, without consulting residents and tenure holders, this government announced 9 wind power projects. The BC Cattlemen's Association has raised serious concerns about the lack of transparency and the removal of environmental assessments. These projects are being developed on Crown land that supports BC's ranching industry, grazing tenures, and critical wildlife habitats. Mr. Speaker, to the Minister of Energy and Climate Solutions, why is this government ramming through industrial-scale wind projects without consulting the communities that shoulder the consequences?
Minister of Energy.
Well, Honourable Speaker, as I think everyone knows in BC, in particular at this moment, when our province and our country are under attack by the U.S. administration, that we need more energy in BC.
That was before the tariffs. Yeah.
And they'll know, Honourable Speaker, that we need, and apparently, Honourable Speaker, the opposition agrees with this on some days of the week, we need more projects to go ahead more efficiently and more quickly. In the case of these wind projects, Honourable Speaker, which are dramatically less expensive than they were in 2009, create jobs all over British Columbia, will deliver low-cost wind power. We are moving ahead with these projects, Honourable Speaker.
Members, you already know the answer. What's the point of asking questions? Let him answer then. Please.
All right. In this case, all of these projects will go through a significant review around permitting, Honourable Speaker, that will address the issues that are appropriate to these projects. Wind power projects have gone under environmental assessment in the past. We know what those issues are, but we also need to proceed, Honourable Speaker. We also need the energy, Honourable Speaker. We also need to advance clean energy at a time, Honourable Speaker, when other parts of the world are advancing other agendas. And we're going to continue to do it, Honourable Speaker. This is about developing BC. This is about a sustainable economy. This is about jobs all over the province, Honourable Speaker. And I'm surprised that the opposition has become on these questions the party of no.
Delta South supplemental.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, Mr. Speaker, this government talks about listening to British Columbians, but they are bulldozing ahead with industrial wind farms on Crown land. They've done this without consulting the ranchers and the communities who rely on this land. Worse, Mr. Speaker, they've eliminated environmental assessments altogether. Mr. Speaker, here is NDP environmental hypocrisy at its best. No reviews, no accountability, just a blank check for projects that could devastate BC's watersheds, BC's wildlife, and species at risk. Mr. Speaker, cattle will not stand underneath windmills. What do cows know that this Premier doesn't?
Minister.
Well, thank you, Honourable Speaker. And in my time in this House since the election, Honourable Speaker, I've listened again and again to members of the opposition side talk about delays, talk about permitting, talk about red tape, Honourable Speaker. Talk about hypocrisy, Honourable Speaker. We are proceeding with clean energy projects that help build BC's economy, and they're against it, Honourable Speaker. This is a time when we need to fight for energy independence and energy sovereignty, and they're against it, Honourable Speaker. We have significant, Honourable Speaker.
Members.
Welcome. The member for Kelowna, one of the projects is in near his community, Honourable Speaker. I'd be interested to know where he stands, not on the theory of going ahead with projects, but on the fact of it. Will he stand up in the House and support economic development in Kelowna, Honourable Speaker, economic development for First Nations, or is he against it, Honourable Speaker? This is a paper opposition, Honourable Speaker. We are fighting for the future of BC's economy, and they are against it, Honourable Speaker.
Members. Abbotsford West.
Well, let's change the channel. Select standing committees play a crucial role in ensuring transparency and accountability by engaging the public, yet this government refuses to recall them. Why does this government operate in secret and continue to make decisions for the public without their input? This government won't even hold a meeting without forcing people to sign an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement. In fact, this government has signed more NDAs than all the governments in BC's history. Mr. Speaker, why is the NDP so intent in shutting out the public and hiding in secrecy?
Premier.
Yes, Honourable Speaker. Members opposite may recall, I'm not sure, I worked at the BC Civil Liberties Association for a period of time. During the time, published a great handbook.
Members.
Published a great handbook educating British Columbians about their rights. Glad to talk to the member about it. But during that time, there was the Jacansky inquiry. There was a man who was involved in altercation with police at YVR. He died. Coming out of that, the then BC Liberal government decided to reform police laws. So they invited the Civil Liberties Association to come in and consult on the legislation that they were preparing. And guess what? Just guess. You'll never guess what they asked me to sign, Honourable Speaker.
Member for North Island, please.
You'll never guess what they asked me to sign, Honourable Speaker. They asked me to sign.
Members, are you really interested in listening to some answers or not? We can shut it down right now if you like. Otherwise, stay quiet, wasting your own time. Premier will conclude.
You'll never guess what they asked me to sign, Honourable Speaker. They asked me to sign a non-disclosure agreement.
Member supplemental.
Well, the Committee of Aboriginal Affairs hasn't met since 2003. The Committee of Legislative Initiatives hasn't met since 2010. This government refuses to let the public in on their plans for our province. No wonder they're known as the most secretive government, according to the Canadian Association of Journalists. Mr. Speaker, when will this government recall committees and stop operating behind closed doors?
Premier.
Well, I know the public is glad for the member's transparency about his second salary, Honourable Speaker. But he's not earning his pay today. 2003 to 2017 and 2010 to 2017, the Leader of the Opposition was on this side of the House. In fact, he was the Minister for Indigenous Relations. If the member wants to strike these committees, I encourage him to talk to the House Leader about getting these committees going. I think committees provide a great opportunity for British Columbians to hear about the issues. That's why we're engaged in so many committees with the members of the opposition.
Member for Columbia River Revelstoke.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this government likes to champion themselves as leaders with reconciliation with Indigenous peoples in BC. Recently, the Métis Nation of BC was told that core funding for K-12 education programs would be slashed by 2/3. Mr. Speaker, my question to any minister in government through you is a simple one. On what planet would this be considered fair and just reconciliation with Indigenous people?
Minister of Education.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker, and I want to thank the member for the question, which is just simply not accurate. We are continuing to work with Indigenous communities all across the province to ensure that funding is directly targeted to support culture, to support language, to support the support needs that their members have. We are firmly committed to reconciliation, which is why we've created the Indigenous Education Councils alongside school boards, so that we can directly connect and work with local nations, with Indigenous partners, to ensure that we are providing those supports that they need.
Member supplemental.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I do have the letter from the Métis Nation of BC, which shows they're getting a 66% cut in their funding. This government is willing to spend $118,000 celebrating bureaucrats, but is unwilling to properly fund Métis education. The remaining funding is $2 per child. Will this government reverse this heartless cut to Métis people and their families and fully fund Métis education?
Minister of Education.
Thank you, Speaker. And again, the member is just simply not correct. We are continuing to support Indigenous education in targeted ways. We have created the Indigenous Education Councils alongside First Nations, alongside Indigenous partners, to ensure that we are directly targeting funding for culture, for language, and for supports, and we are going to continue to do that.
Anybody else? Member for Langley Abbotsford.
Mr. Speaker, the Kootenay Ferry strike is approaching its 5th month without a resolution. We learned the other day negotiation talks have broken down. There are only 3 sailings for these communities that depend on this ferry for their livelihood and well-being. Mr. Speaker, will this government at the very least commit to pushing this route up to 5 sailings a day while the negotiations continue?
Minister of Labour.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Speaker, and thank you to the member for the question. Look, I understand that people in the Kootenays rely on the ferry service, and I understand they are very frustrated with the ongoing dispute. And I have been very clear in this House and outside of this House that it is my expectation that both parties will work diligently and with urgency to resolve their collective bargaining dispute, and that, frankly, is what I expect to be happening. I understand that people in the Kootenays need that ferry, and we need those parties to be at the table to get a deal and get things back to normal.
Member supplemental.
Mr. Speaker, this chaos in the Kootenays must end. There's a 23% increase over 3 years. Well, British Columbians don't have that same offer to them. The operator has offered 8% the first year, second, 2% the second, 13% the third. BCGU wants 13%, 8%, then 2%. People's lives are in chaos. And this minister, this government, and this local MLA are doing nothing. Mr. Speaker, to the Minister of Labour, will she do the right thing and appoint a mediator and end this strike?
Mr. Premier.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. The people of the Kootenays deserve accessible, affordable, readily available transportation. The Minister and her team are working to ensure that both sides reach a deal at the table and get things moving again. Now, the member's got great passion, rightly so, about economic challenges in the Kootenays. Our whole province, in fact, our whole country, is facing a major economic challenge right now, coming from the President of the United States, which is why I would love to see.
Calm down. You should stop talking. Premier, conclude, please.
I'd love to see the same passion from the opposition fighting the tariffs, fighting Donald Trump, but instead we saw the health critic for the opposition party.
Members.
Bring that passion to all British Columbians. Don't sit beside a YouTuber who says, quote, They know who she sat beside. That's why
Opposition House Leader, could you please ask your members to be in order? Calm down. Order in the House.
Panel with a YouTuber that said, quote, I'm going to do my best to buy American products so the idiots who are buying into Trudeau's Team Canada BS have less impact. Quote, I don't want Trump to hold back. Any suffering will be because of Trudeau, not Trump. And called the Prime Minister, quote, the Governor of Canada. I can't wait for the opposition to have the same passion for defending all British Columbians as they rightly do for defending the people of the Kootenays.
The bell ends the question period.